want you to think of a leader you respect that has greatly influenced you. And think of the top 3 qualities that make this person a leader to you. The chances are that responsibility, dedication, and trustworthiness are amongst the top few qualities of a leader. Now here's a question. Was Adolf Hitler a leader? The answer is yes. He had a lot of influence. He was responsible, dedicated, and he was trusted. Was John F. Kennedy a leader? The answer is also yes. Like Hitler, he too was responsible, dedicated, and he was trusted. So from these questions alone, it is very important for us to not confuse our own philosophy of a leader with the definition of leadership. And the difference between Hitler and JFK was that one of them was a moral leader and the other was not. I'm sure you can guess who is which. But I'm going to walk you through a few key phases in my life that has helped me define and envelop moral leadership as a top priority. One of my first memories of my mother, and this is strange to some of you guys, was when she was changing my diapers. And she spanked me on my butt cheek with this smile on her face. I was confused. And it wasn't until later on in life when I became a little bit wiser that I realized she had spanked me out of adoration and not of disappointment. Some of my childhood experiences with my father were unfortunately those of his drunken escapades when he would come home to scold, abuse, and force our family to be submissive under his tyranny. I feared him, but I didn't necessarily respect him. See, my family had always taught me that, as a theory, family loyalty is the #1 priority. That in life, nobody will be there to support me more than my family ever will. Now, as you can imagine, I was conflicted by the idea of morality. How can I possibly believe that family loyalty is #1 when I have yet to see loyalty and love from all ends in the family? But I learned through my own personal development that as a principle, not a theory, loyalty is best learned from the family, and that having good upbringing actually enhances our chances of success. The key phrase is enhances our chances, but not always. So I call this time in my life the gray area, which is a time of discovering and developing my own perception of morality. And this was a time when I hoarded a whole lot of information about myself and my surroundings, but I didn't exactly know what to do with it. But because a time of discovery and development often points us to new possibilities, this particular time has also taught me of my potential. But because potential is ever-changing, potential is unstable, and therefore the gray area is also never-ending. I was dreaming big, chasing big. I wanted good things for myself and for those around me, but I had no clue and no real guidance on how to execute it. And so we spend our lives by constantly chasing our potential, which is truly a limitless goal. We're actually limiting ourselves from having the fullest impact in the present. And we forget that today is the most important day in our lives, and that in order to exist and better prep ourselves for the future, we need to see that today matters. So in the gray area, I was primarily a potential chaser. When I was 18, I met a business partner and life mentor by the name of David Powell. David and I would meet up on a weekly basis for business meetings, and at these meetings, he would help map out a strategy for me to achieve my goals. And on one of those nights, I was at the epitome of negativity. I had a horrendous argument at home. I was stressed out from school. I was in a bad relationship, and just about everything wasn't going my way. But sure enough, David wasn't doing so well either. He had just broken off a 4-year relationship with his ex-girlfriend. So when we met up and we exchanged this bit of news, I had no idea what to say to him. But unlike me, he was able to momentarily drop his emotions at the door to help me with my situation first, which actually became a 4-hour coaching session. And 3 of those hours were spent on emphasizing the importance of my own personal development and changing my mentality into thinking and growing rich. And in the last hour, we went back to discussing business. So as I drove home, I asked myself, where do people like David come from? And what makes him different from the rest of the leaders out there? Well, for one, he believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. He pointed me to valuable information to better myself, and he served me sacrificially without ever expecting anything in return. And although he wasn't perfect, it was his humility and his active integrity about his own flaws, such as those in his relationship, that has developed my trust in him as a leader. And hence, I believed and trusted where my company was heading because I trusted my leader. And David was someone who I felt, if duplicated, would actually benefit society. And so since David's form of leadership stems from having a high sense of morality, this will classify him as a moral leader. And moral leader oftentimes move people towards acts of integrity, justice, love, and humility. And moral leaders change people from the inside out. Let me show you an example. Here's our circles of influence. It starts with us, or you. This is who you are and what you represent. And of course, our upbringing, family, then our friends. Followed by the community. This is your extracurricular activities, your church group, your dance team, social club, country club. And of course, social media. Facebook, Instagram. For some of you guys, Tinder. And for some of us, when we strip away the outer layers of influence, we find it difficult to have an identity. And this just goes to show how much the outside world has shaped who we are. And this particular type of leader will usually try to reform the world by dealing with the world first. And this approach just doesn't work, because what they're doing is they're trying to deal with effect and not the cause. A moral leader will look for the intents and motives of their own character first, and they will reform the world by working on the inside conditions first. So in retrospect, our self-worth comes from self and not others. If our worth comes from others, we will find it ridiculously hard to respect and love ourselves. And as I've aged over the course of time, after reading about generations and generations through its innovations and lifestyles, but especially over the course of time on where I obtained some of my news, Facebook, the types of people out there are generally about the same. And now I'm not talking about the way we appear in fashion, but humanity as a whole, in the aspect of the way we think, the way we perceive, the way we act and react to similar situations are about the same. You see someone argue over a post on Facebook because they might be offended. You see someone liking another post because they're like-minded. And you see someone simply liking a post because somebody else has made a connection to them. And so in many ways, the same ways we obtain knowledge, particularly in the ideas of leadership, is through a combination of what we've read in the past, in addition to what we've experienced in our own lives. And we then apply these commonalities, and we apply these theories and principles, and we build our futures with them. But here's the interesting thing. Historically, and especially through media, leadership success had always been associated with a booming company, money and power, that the more you have, the more successful you are, which automatically positions you to be a great leader. Well, this has always been false. How many do you know today who have money and power are also happy, ethical, and purposeful? There are few. And today, these successful principles and ideas, they often appear in social media platforms and publications such as Forbes magazine, Entrepreneurial, Business Week, Harvard Business Review, and even GQ magazine. And they often like to appear via articles such as the top 10 ways on how to become successful, or how to become blank. And while I personally like to read these articles from time to time, I've understood that the sole reliance on these sources without having actual experience has actually deflected me from affording my own possibility of failure through my own unique experiences. And what I mean by that is this. If one of the top 10 lists indicated that in order to succeed, you must double your rate of failure, by reading and knowing that as a mere fact, might actually prevent myself from going out there to fail, because in my mind, I think I know better and therefore I shouldn't fail. And I just did the exact opposite of what I was told. But I realized that these articles make the most sense after I have gone out to execute them. I want you to understand that not all preparations for success and articles necessarily lead to long-term success. And for example, Enron. And unfortunately, I have to use them as a classic example. In 1985, they are a natural gas company. In 1985, they started and became a multi-billion-dollar corporation. In 2001, they fell under investigation. 3 years later, in 2004, the CEO was sentenced to 10 years in prison for securities fraud and conspiracy. A total of 19 years this company was standing. See, this company had a whole lot of success. They were around for a very long time, but they had also failed. But Wall Street crash in 2008 has taught us that greed, selfishness, and short-sighted leadership isn't sustainable. See, what these businesses had in common was that even though they had good intention, they had unethical leaders. And at some point of reaching some form of financial success, they've gotten lost between business and the reasons as to why they started the company in the first place. And so when you combine a company with a pretty idea and an ugly morale, you get a pretty ugly situation. And so before we read these articles, we need to first embrace that the benchmark of leadership is ethics. When it comes to our jobs, we need to ask ourselves, who are we following and why are we following them? And what is it exactly that we're following? Some of you may argue that, well, I believe in the success of my company, but not necessarily my leader. Well, that just simply won't work. Because you cannot possibly be certain where your company is heading if you yourself or the person you are following is somebody you are uncertain of. And so for a long period of time in my life, I was primarily a money chaser. I thought that my self-worth was equivalent to my vocational success. When my father passed away, he had died a better man. He made better choices. And it was my understanding of the lack of authoritative figures in his life that it easily explained his behaviors. And at some point between adolescence and adulthood, I've learned that by doing the things that counter negativity, such as forgiving my father for his wrongdoings, has actually liberated me from the power of destructive energy that once consumed my life. And by doing so, I was slowly able to free myself from the natural laws of society. And this goes to show that our choices are powerful, and our choices can change the direction of what we naturally attract. So what kind of things should we be attracting? Is it beautiful people? Fancy cars? While those things are nice, let's talk about this from ground zero. One of the most beautiful things about the human body was that it was designed to heal itself. When we're sick, our bodies naturally fight to heal, with or without us telling us to do so. When we cut our fingers, it'll heal on its own unless we continuously try to injure it. So from a physiological standpoint, humans were intentionally created to promote health and well-being, to do this healthy thing because it's best for us. And therefore, it's a tangible relationship that intends for humans to become leaders of positive establishments and not of destruction. So the best type of leader that suits this particular role isn't someone like Adolf Hitler. It's David Powell, a moral leader. I want to show you a chart on the effects of the 3 life pursuits I've mentioned. The y-axis measures our level of positive impact in the world, and the x-axis measures time, starting from today, the day we decide on that pursuit. When I was a potential chaser, I've always thought that in the back of my mind that since the biggest impact I will ever make and the best of what I have to offer wouldn't occur until later on in life, I was actually preventing myself from fully existing on a day-to-day basis. And because I had no real guidance, I was trying to be someone I wasn't. So therefore, I couldn't go by the days without having some form of regret in my life. When I was a money chaser, while young and ambitious, and I think I still am, I had a lot of energy, and I was ready to succeed, I was ready to learn, I was ready to fail. But when life happened, such as health issues or a loss of a loved one, I realized that the sole pursuit for money was never able to successfully rule over those things in my life. And as I've aged, I realized that my pursuit for money for myself had definitely made a statement, but not necessarily a positive impact. In my pursuit of moral leadership, not only was I authentically attacking and consciously aware of my potential and my career, the biggest difference lies in the victory that I've had over the ways I've handled life circumstances, such as my father's death, an unjust person, my own successes, my failures, as well as my mistakes. I was able to tackle these issues head-on the right way. And there was success in the overall balance of my life. And in the pursuit of moral leadership, the positive impact in the world that I've left was always remaining at its peak. And therefore, I know that when I exit this world, I will still resonate with them. Let's jump back momentarily to an earlier phase of my life. This was the time when my mother spanked me. And by the way, this was the result of my grandmother's diet plan, along with my lack of self-awareness and gluttony. But anyway, that's besides the point. You see, you never know what a baby will become based on what they initially look like. And given that you and I don't live in a third world country, our choices are powerful. I ultimately chose what I want to be, and I choose moral leadership not only because it is the most successful, but because it is timeless. Thank you very much.